What was your "it seemed like a good idea at the time" story? I let my 14-year-old cousin at the time try driving the family car. I was like 18 back then or 20, and I told him it's easy to drive an automatic car, basically like driving a go-kart. Told him gas was right and brakes were center. I forgot to mention that changing the gear to D will automatically have the car move. We both panicked and hit a fucking tree in front of us at probably 1 mile per hour. Luckily we were in our neighborhood by a dead end. Snow water skiing. Me driving the snowmobile across a snowy field and my little brother skiing behind holding a tow rope, 2 broken legs. Me and my friend used to play a game where we threw a Swiss Army knife up in the air at nighttime and then ran away from it, with the knife part out. When I was a kid I tried to ride my bike up the trunk of a tree so I could kick off and try to land it and it'd be really cool. Turns out the tree trunk is rounded and so you'll just slip off the trunk and hit your head on the tree. My brother still gives me shit about trying to ride my bike up a tree. Shooting each other with fireworks on New Year's. One landed directly in between my eyes. Luckily, it didn't go off and I wasn't injured. Hey, you know those degenerates who you stay out drinking with until sunrise every other day? Why don't you live with them for the last 2 years of law school? That won't cause any issues at all. Q 2 years of abuse to my body and liver and more than a little strain between me and my friends at the time. Overall it was fun, but definitely not a good idea. So I was in Uganda with my family, and we see a large, about 5 feet tall, curled up leaf hanging about 8 feet off the ground. We're told that these leaves curl up and fall out the trees, and they're pretty heavy, so it can be dangerous to have it fall on you. My dad and I think it'd be helpful of us to get this thing down, so we're there whacking it with sticks, trying to get it down, to no avail, when my dad says, "Hey, climb up on that wall there, son, and jump, grab it and then pull it down." Well, that sounds like a swell idea, Dad, so I do just that. I don't manage to get it all the way down, but as soon as I hit the ground, I get this burning sensation in my elbow. Turns out there's a hive of Ugandan mud wasps living in this specific leaf, and they do not take kindly to young men trying to tug their home down. So I'm just sprinting back to the office where the rest of my family is sheltered from the sun, and I practically have 2 elbows on one arm at this point while, as my dad described it later, an army of large, black blots give chase. I make it back inside and my arm is numb, except for the searing pain in my elbow. Thankfully, there was no further reaction. The pain lasted only around 3 hours and the swelling was down by the end of the day. That being said, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. Even worse than the time I broke my arm into 3 pieces while arm wrestling. How did you break your arm while arm wrestling? I was waiting for an excuse to tell this story, so there I was, away on a weekend retreat for young people. I was a helper on the staff along with my wife and we were on the last day, ready to go home. Well, the message is about Samson and his mighty strength. So, of course, as we're all sat around waiting for lunch, everyone is arm wrestling. Now I'm staying out of all this young man nonsense, when suddenly my wife chirps up, "Come on, get involved." So I'm resigned. I've got nothing to prove, and I'm not particularly strong. So I know I'm not gonna win, but it's almost home time. I've been stuck sleeping amongst stinky young men for 3 nights and I see an opportunity to prove to my wife that tonight might be a lucky night. I may not be strong, but I'm stubborn. So, I agree. I'm up against an 18-year-old, the victor of our lunch table, and I'm like, I know I'm not gonna win this, but I'm gonna stick us at a stalemate. My pain threshold is good enough, and I think I can bear it long enough for him to accept. So we lock, weak arms first, thank God, and we start. I'm holding my own actually, and our arms aren't moving. Things are going well. So I don't actually remember what happened next. All I know is that everyone is agape. I feel the back of my hand on the table and someone is screaming. My wife explained later that it was me. There was no pain, but my arm had made a loud crunch, and flopped down with the force of the young man with something to prove. Immediately everyone clears the room, and I'm just sitting there like, I think I just broke my arm. Finger still moving, feels weird. There's a nurse also volunteering for the weekend who sits with me for the 2 hours it took for paramedics to arrive. Turns out that at around the same time, a lady in the nursing home next door had had a stroke and we were only in a small town, so she took the priority. Also, turns out arm wrestling position is mighty uncomfortable when held for a long time, but I'm actually pretty chuffed. I've got my wife taking pictures, I'll share 'em if you like, and we even let everyone back into the room to finish up the weekend so they can all go home properly to spend it. I only cried once, when telling my wife that it wasn't her fault that I was stuck in this situation, so the pain is starting to kick in and the room's empty. Next thing I know, this thing is on my mouth and this guy is cutting my sleeve, asking me all these questions, and time is going real funky. Seriously, the more I breathed, the more everything was like when you film a feedback monitor, like my brain can't seem to process new information, so it's just recycling all the old stuff on an endless loop, and then they switch the gas off and I'm coming out, and my arm is in this orange inflatable ice pack and I'm being wheeled into an ambulance. Hey, I've had this dream before. Wow, cool, I gotta tell my wife. Turns out I'm huffing the stuff too quickly. Well, now I'm rambling. We were able to drive home that evening. Didn't want to stay an extra day, and now I'm famous every time we rehost that youth weekend as the guy that broke his arm wrestling. Edit. Wow, this really blew up overnight. Awesome. Pictures for all, as requested. Holding the wrestle position for so long hurts more than the break did. Still pretty chipper about it. Just wish fixing my teeth was easier than fixing my arm. Trace the arm with your finger. Not bent correctly. I'm not even sure that's my elbow sticking out there. Not a fun situation. Thankfully had my volunteer nurse on hand. Paid £10 for access to the scans. Yep, that's a real bad break right there. Healing nicely after 2 months in a new plastic mold cast. I ran across the street with my eyes closed. When I was 14, I didn't get hit by a car. However, I ran into a tree headfirst and cut my face and knee open. For all of you asking what my thought process was, it is as follows. Who am I kidding? I have no idea what I was thinking. So back in the day my brothers and I were shooting a bow and arrow behind our house. We had a proper backstop and a nice target on a bale of hay. After about an hour we were getting bored and one of my brothers had a stroke of genius. Let effing light one on fire. So there we are wiring rags to arrows and soaking them in gas and shooting stuff. Didn't take long and half the yard was on fire. We'd shot pretty much every flammable thing we could burn in the yard. Since we were running short on stuff to shoot, my brother decided to launch one in a 45 degrees arc over the woods behind the house. We all watched sore laughing and giggling. When it hit the apex was when it dawned on us that this was in fact a really stupid effing idea. All 6 of us sprinted off into the woods in the direction it had been shot. Wasn't hard to find, it'd light an entire little meadow on fire. So we ran around stomping out fires for an hour. When we finally got the fire put out we were sitting by the creek and my oldest brother looks at us all and says, "Dad never hears a word about this." In high school, my friend discovered that he was particularly agile at running toward the wall and kicking off of it into a backflip. He would do this all day, every day, before school, at lunch, etc. One day we were inside a classroom and the teacher had stepped out for a moment. Of course he took this opportunity to try his little trick. He didn't, however, take into account the fact that drywall might not support his weight as well as the brick and concrete walls he'd tried before. His leg ended up busting straight through the wall to the other side, into a classroom full of students taking an exam. So I wasn't actually in the class taking the exam, but to this day, I still imagine how strange and hilarious it would be to be sitting in that class then suddenly see a leg burst through the wall. Makes me smile just thinking about it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.